When the royal servants heard the noise, they understood something was very wrong. From behind closed doors came a sound that none of them had ever heard in their years of duty. Prince William's sobs were so deep and sad that they shattered the very walls around him. If a guy could lay his mother to rest at the age of 15 without crying, what could possibly break him? Nothing could break a prince who was taught from the start to never exhibit his emotions. Just a few hours ago, Catherine had secured the sitting room door, ensuring that only members of her family could enter. The kids' pale features and big eyes betrayed their horror when they emerged from hiding. Can you tell me what their mom said to them in that room? Is this a serious health concern? Royal controversy, a danger to the throne. But when the truth did emerge, it was unfathomable to anyone. It rendered all previous royal crises irrelevant, and it would alter the course of their lives irrevocably. William sobbed as if his world were collapsing because the statement Catherine made that day held a bombshell so explosive and so personally devastating that it will make perfect sense when you hear it. Reason being, it was in many respects. Follow us. Inexplicable actions. Princess Kate had changed a few months ago, though it was impossible to say when precisely. William mentally rewound discussions, trying to pinpoint when things took a turn for the worse. It wasn't until all of a sudden that the transformation, which had been slow and barely noticeable, became apparent. Excuses of weariness or incongruous scheduling problems led her to decline offers she would ordinarily accept. Her customary friendliness at public appearances seems artificial. Her grins were more contrived than sincere. While the princess was physically there, the palace servants noted and whispered to themselves that she seemed preoccupied. The first telltale indicator occurred over supper with the family, when Catherine suddenly left the table, citing a headache as her reason. A few minutes later, William escorted her upstairs and discovered her seated on the floor of the bathroom, with her phone tightly held in her fist and tears flowing down her cheeks. As soon as she heard him coming, she blinked quickly, straightened her back, and began to reassemble the walls he had seen a peek of before. She told him it was nothing serious, just stress from their hectic schedule, when he questioned what was wrong. There was something in her face that made him want to insist on honesty even more than he actually did. She was still not prepared to speak. Refusing to address the matter would cause her to withdraw even further. In a private time, George told his father that Mom had been acting strange. Instead of sending protection officers, which she rarely did without prior planning, she picked him up from school 3 times last week. On the way home, she probed him with intrusive questions about his hopes for the future, his priorities in life, and whether or not he ever wished their family were ordinary, whatever that would entail. Not because of the inappropriate content, but because his mother appeared to be desperate for his answers, as if George's remarks had more weight than mere curiosity. George found the chats unnerving. One afternoon, Charlotte saw her mother sobbing in the garden, hid behind some rose bushes, as if no one could see. The image tormented Charlotte, but she refrained from interjecting since she sensed this was personal suffering not meant to be shared. She had never met someone as powerful as her mother, someone who dealt with every situation with poise and resolve. Charlotte was terrified for reasons she couldn't put her finger on when she saw her so broken. She was afraid she was betraying her trust in her father if she brought it up to him. William softly thanked her as his worry grew to a more imminent threat. Other peculiarities were noted by the palace employees. The royal archives are normally kept for historical research, but Princess Kate had asked to use them. She pretended to be gathering information for a future project regarding royal heritage as she spent hours poring over old records, which prompted questions about her unexpected fascination with family history. Though it looked reasonable, the explanation felt lacking. William went to confront her one night while the kids were in bed. There was too much evidence that something major was happening for him to continue ignoring it, and he finally snapped. "Whatever it is, Catherine, we will confront it together. There is someone else that can help you with this." Her expression was one of anguish and something else entirely, and he couldn't put his finger on it. Embarrassment or fear, maybe. "I know," she whispered. "Also, I will tell you everything as soon as possible. But please, trust me right now. Even though it doesn't make sense just yet, I need you to trust that what I'm doing is vital." All her remarks did was add to the air of intrigue surrounding their lives, rather than providing any solace. William had a hard time falling asleep. Nights he would lie awake, thinking about the worst possible outcomes. Is she sick? He was utterly frightened by the idea. She felt threatened, didn't she? Their position made them a regular target for blackmail. Had she uncovered a family secret that altered her entire understanding of them? The terror level rose with each new potential outcome. The idea of engaging private investigators was quickly discarded from his mind, that he could not rationalize, and which would break their marriage and undermine her confidence. He waited, unable to break the spell of his own worry while simultaneously honoring her right to seclusion. On a Tuesday afternoon, things finally snapped. Because his engagement ended earlier than expected, William was able to return home early. As he entered the house, he could make out Catherine's voice emanating from the study. With an agitated and frantic tone, she was on the phone. "I am unsure of the duration. I have to conceal this information from them. Someone ought to inform them." The difficulty increases with each passing day. Without being able to move, William froze in the corridor, adamantly refusing to eavesdrop. Catherine was still talking, but her voice was getting worse. "I can't even begin to fathom the consequences for them. What am I even going to say? How can I break the news that everything is about to change for them?" William was unable to understand the other person's response. With his heart racing so rapidly that he felt it may explode, William gingerly retreated. Next day, whoever it was that Catherine had been keeping a secret would finally have to come out. For the remainder of the day, he remained disoriented, merely going through the motions. As Catherine put it, he stared at his children while they ate supper, his eyes fixed on their innocent faces as they remained oblivious to the impending catastrophe that would alter the course of their lives forever. How could anything so little be so important? No matter how many alternatives he considered, his thoughts always came up empty. It all didn't add up. Something was obviously off. Later that night, after climbing into bed beside William and remaining silent for an extended period, Princess Kate went to bed late. She then spoke softly, barely audible. William wanted to interrogate her endlessly, but he restrained himself after seeing the expression on her face. She seemed to be struggling to keep herself together. Everything changed after the news. Deceptive normalcy greeted the morning. I made breakfast. The kids had supper, played, and argued about their usual sibling antics. Catherine went robotically through the motions, her thoughts obviously elsewhere. William observed her intently, picking up on her quivering hands as she poured the juice and her constant checking of the clock, as if both anxious and excited about what was to come. She summoned everyone to the living room after breakfast. The kids gave each other puzzled looks, but eventually cooperated. They sat down on couches, sensing this was required. William and Catherine faced the three kids, who gathered around each other. Somehow, the air was heavier and the room seemed smaller. With a long inhalation, Catherine clenched her fists to calm herself. "Good to see you here. What I'm about to tell you may sound unusual, but it's crucial. I ought to have informed you about this long ago." Tears were welling up in her eyes, but she kept her voice firm. William, whose exact target was unknown, leaned forward, tensing every muscle in his body in preparation for impact. As if trying to commit each child's face to memory in anticipation of the transformation that was about to occur, Catherine studied them one by one. "You know how much your father and I love you, how we would do anything to protect you and give you the best life possible." The children nodded, confused about where this was going. George, being the oldest, spoke up. "Mom, you are scaring us. What is this about?" Catherine swallowed hard, gathering courage for words that clearly did not want to come out. "This is about our family, about decisions I made before you were born, decisions that affect all of you in ways I did not fully understand at the time." William's confusion deepened. Before they were born, what could reach back that far? Catherine continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "When your father and I married, we desperately wanted children. But things did not happen as easily as we hoped. We struggled for a long time. We saw specialists, tried different options, and faced disappointments that nearly broke us." William's mind raced. He remembered those difficult years, the private pain they endured while maintaining public appearances. But they had gotten through it. They had their children. So what was Catherine saying? She took another shaky breath. "We eventually sought help through advanced medical procedures, treatments that gave us the greatest chance of having the family we dreamed of." The children listened, not fully understanding, but sensing the gravity of what their mother was revealing. Catherine's next words came out in a rush, as if saying them quickly would make them easier. "During those treatments, we made choices about genetic selection, medical decisions that I thought were routine, that I thought would simply ensure healthy pregnancies. But recently, I learned something that changed everything I thought I knew about those choices." William felt ice spreading through his veins. Genetic selection, medical decisions. Where was this going? Catherine looked directly at him now, tears flowing freely. "William, the clinic we used and the doctors we trusted were not entirely honest with us about what they were doing. I found out months ago through a medical investigation that was happening completely separate from us. The clinic had been conducting unauthorized genetic modifications, experimental procedures that they never disclosed to their patients, procedures that affected the children we conceived there." The room spun. William heard the words, but could not process them. Genetic modifications, unauthorized, experimental, his children. Catherine rushed on. needing to get everything out before she lost courage. I have been working with lawyers and medical experts to understand exactly what was done and what it means. The modifications were not harmful. In fact, they were designed to enhance certain traits: intelligence, physical health, and resistance to diseases. Things that sound positive but raise enormous ethical questions. Questions about consent, playing God, and what it means for our children's futures. George stood abruptly, his face pale. "What are you saying? That we are not normal? That someone changed us before we were even born?" Catherine reached for him, but he stepped back, his expression a mixture of confusion and anger. "You let someone experiment on us." "George, no," Catherine said desperately. "We did not know. Given the information, we would never have consented to this. First, we assumed we were just administering the usual reproductive medications. Dozens more families were deceived by the clinic. We, too, are being harmed by this." As a result of being unable to process the information, Charlotte began to cry. However, the knowledge was horrifying. As a young boy, Louis tried to make sense of his family's distress by looking between his parents and siblings. William was able to find his voice at last, but it sounded foreign and choked. "Since when did you find out? Tell me how long you've been on your own with this." Catherine locked eyes with him. Her face betrayed her feelings of guilt and agony. 3 months. I have been aware for 3 months. I refrained from informing you until I had a better grasp of the matter. Before we brought anything to you, make sure you knew exactly what we were dealing with. I was trying to shield everyone from this, but now I see that I was really simply trying to avoid dealing with it myself. William rose to his feet, shaky on his wobbly knees. Something solid to anchor him to a world that had lost all meaning was what he needed: air, space. Unbeknownst to him, genetic engineering had been done to his own offspring. Someone had changed their basic biology for reasons he couldn't fathom, and the results were beyond his control. He couldn't make sense of the breach. It was too big to fit in his head. As he watched Catherine crumble, he felt his own composure slipping away. Uncontrollable and bitter tears flowed at that moment. He exited the room and proceeded down the hall, seemingly avoiding the scene. The overwhelming weight of an impending reality was preventing him from breathing or thinking. All he could do was feel it. 30 minutes after she discovered William in their bedroom, Catherine unraveled the plot. His body trembled from uncontrollable tears that had persisted since he departed from the sitting room, and he perched on the side of the bed, his face buried in his hands. She walked cautiously up to him, hoping he would understand, knowing full well that she deserved his wrath. She whispered to William, "Allow me to clarify everything for you." With bulging and angry eyes, he glanced upwards. "Give an example. For 3 months, you withheld this information from me. How do you justify this? If you made that choice on your own, how would you defend it?" Sitting next to him, she kept her distance yet was close enough to reach out and touch him if he wanted. "I see your point. I apologize for not informing you sooner. I was petrified, worried about the implications, worried about your reaction. I was afraid for the kid's safety. Over the course of 3 months, I sought out legal counsel, gathered evidence, and attempted to comprehend the whole breadth of what transpired. I wanted to provide you solutions, not simply issues." William disagreed and voiced his disapproval. "Catherine and I are partners. Together, we tackle challenges. I was denied that option by you. Because you felt I was incapable of dealing with the truth, you felt compelled to shield me. While you bore this nightmare alone, who shielded you from harm?" Something in her was shattered by his words. Her sobbing intensified. "The years of dominance are gradually crumbling. It breaks my heart. Our lovely children had been subjected to an experiment, and I apologize for my ignorance. But I was unsure of how to break the news to you. Is there a way to pronounce those phrases aloud without breaking something?" William drew her near as their mutual sorrow replaced his rage. Clutching one another, they sobbed. This specific nightmare was too much for these two individuals, who had already endured innumerable trials. William eventually drew back and began to wipe his eyes. "Give me the rundown of what you've learned. I must comprehend the nature of the matter at hand." Thankful for the opportunity to finally divide and conquer, Catherine nodded. She went on to describe her initial exposure to the probe. Months ago, a journalist who was following up on a tip regarding fertility clinics performing illegal treatments approached the palace. The journalist intended to notify the impacted families before publishing the expose, but she was still gathering information. The compromised medical records included Catherine's name among those identified as possible victims. At first, Catherine thought it was all just conspiracy theory babble, but the journalist eventually produced evidence that was too strong to ignore. Information regarding unrevealed medical procedures, altered consent forms, and scholarly articles written by the clinic's head researcher on the topic of genetic engineering to produce superior progeny. Although the publications did not identify any particular patients or utilize any identifying code, the dates absolutely coincided with when Catherine and William were receiving treatment. In order to independently confirm the facts, Catherine retained the services of private investigators and medical specialists. There were no issues. Families with a lot of money and power were the targets of the clinic's illicit program, which they ran for years. A number of genes linked to IQ, health, and longevity were the targets of these complex alterations. Because of this program, the offspring were basically better than what they would have been otherwise. While not drastically altered, the optimizations did bring up serious moral concerns. The more William listened, the more horrified he became. What made them act in this way? Exactly what would they benefit from? Catherine elaborated on the fact that Dr. Marcus Holloway, the principal investigator, thought he was promoting human evolution. He reasoned that affluent families would make perfect test subjects as they could afford to provide their children more opportunities to succeed. He fooled himself into thinking he was helping humanity by producing future leaders with exceptional character. It seems his conscience was unconcerned by the fact that he was acting without permission. Decades of impacted families in a number of nations were identified by the inquiry. They were like royalty to some. Politicians, prominent business people, and celebrities were among the others. Everyone in a position of power and wealth. Everyone whose children were now living laboratories. The clinic and Dr. Holloway were the targets of lawsuits filed by multiple families. Even though criminal charges were still pending, the question that every impacted family was confronting at the time was not resolved through the formal justice system. How did they explain things to their offspring? How did they facilitate their understanding of this data? Concerning potential health effects, William inquired. Was there a danger to the kids? Were any health issues brought on by the changes? The specialist Catherine consulted said the changes seemed stable and didn't pose any acute health risks. But because this had never been done before, the long-term ramifications were unclear. Ongoing medical supervision is necessary for the children. They should seek out genetic counseling as they mature and think about starting a family of their own. We may be able to pass these changes on to our descendants. The complete impact went beyond anything anyone had anticipated. George stepped into the foyer, his expression severe and withdrawn. William and Catherine were startled since they didn't realize he was listening to them say, "Are you finished talking about us like we are science projects?" George, a young man whose wrath radiated from his body, entered the room. "Do we have any input into this, or are you free to do as you like?" William went to grab George, but he resisted. "Someone changed us because you allowed it. Shake us to our core, and now you're acting victimized when we're the ones stuck with the consequences. Among us, there is a notable difference." Standing up, Catherine cautiously made her way to her kid. "George, there is no significant difference between the two of you. You are the same boy I brought into this world, nurtured and cherished each and every day. These changes will not make you who you are. They have no effect on your fundamental identity." A touch too cynical for his years, George's laughter was bitter. "I bet you have no idea. What this signifies is a mystery to all of us. Perhaps I am nothing more than a facade. Perhaps I am merely a lab-created designer kid and not even your son." Their hearts shattered at the sound of anguish in his voice. With a hard yet kind grip, William crossed the room to embrace George by the shoulders. "Pay attention to what I have to say. You were born into my family. We can't change it. Not an unlicensed experiment conducted by a doctor. Not alterations to DNA. Not a thing. It was your mom and I who gave you life. Even before your birth, you were desired and cherished. We had no idea what was done to you, and we certainly didn't approve. Nevertheless, the core reality remains that you belong to us, and we belong to you." George's wrath dissipated as bewilderment and terror supplanted it. "Is it possible that I am not who I claim to be? Is it possible that my entire self-perception is incorrect?" When Catherine saw them, she rushed over to embrace William and George. "Next, we collaborate to find a solution. Regardless of the changes, we discover your true identity and the identities of your siblings. You are more than just your genes, and we make sure you know it. Your character, your decisions, and your heart make you who you are. Those things remained unchanged. Those are completely you." Instead of putting on the brave face he had been attempting, George finally let himself be comforted by his parents and sank into their arms. As a unit, the family recovers from its wounds. What came next was just terrible. Charlotte spent hours alone in her room, hardly speaking to anyone. Because she was too little to understand what was happening, Lizzie felt too attached to her family and anxious. Feelings of despair and wrath vacillated within George. He went from being furious at the injustice of what had happened to them to being frightened about his future as a result of it. As they dealt with their own trauma, William and Catherine did their best to keep everyone together. It was suffocating. The involvement of palace officials was a necessary evil. Given the ongoing legal processes and the fact that journalists were getting ready to publish their findings, this could not be hidden. Concerning the public presentation of the material, crisis management teams came together, attorneys prepared remarks, and medical professionals were consulted. After receiving the news, King Charles responded with his customary wrath. He insisted that those responsible for the abuse of his family will face the consequences of their actions and demanded to meet with attorneys. William perceived fear lurking beneath the wrath. Worried about the future of his grandkids, the monarchy, and the line of succession, his father feared for their safety. Concerns arose around the possibility of genetically engineered people inheriting the throne. We reached out to legal experts. Cases from the past were studied. This was completely new ground for everyone involved. Nothing had ever happened like this before. In contrast, Queen Camilla paid frequent visits, brought toys and books, sat silently with Charlotte when words failed, and played with Louis to create a sense of normalcy. Being around her was soothing. She was like a rock in a storm that never seemed to go away. Keeping thinking about how this happened will make everyone crazy, she warned Catherine in private. The only way forward was to assist the kids cope with this realization and develop identities that weren't shaped by external factors. Tensions rose during meetings of extended family members. As elephants filled every space, everyone tried to act normally. As a result of the uncomfortable atmosphere and the extra scrutiny from their relatives, the kids felt even more alone and wronged. It seems that the decision was made to inform the public as soon as possible. The family learned they had been the subjects of an illegal medical experiment carried out many years ago, and a carefully worded statement was drafted to explain this. They stressed in the statement that they were collaborating with the proper authorities to bring those accountable to justice. There was a tremendous uproar. Speculation and rumors of conspiracies burst forth on social media. The ethics of genetic alteration, its effects on the royal family, and the prospects for reproductive therapies were topics of ongoing coverage in the media. The public's reaction was polarized. Some felt sorry for the family, while others were outraged. Some people thought that the royal family's use of genetic enhancements was an unfair advantage, creating a literal upper class. The validity of allowing children to inherit titles and jobs was a hotly debated topic. There was no escaping the ear-splitting din. As much as possible, William and Catherine chose to keep the children out of the spotlight. Certain devices were not allowed. All internet traffic was recorded. They built a fortress around their house, a haven protected from the prying eyes of the outside world. Isolation, however, was not an option. Classmates had access to the internet, so even with strong security measures, some information managed to slip through. After getting into an altercation with a classmate who had insulted him as a lab rat, George returned home from school one day sporting a black eye. Despite the school's covert handling of the situation, it served to further emphasize how unattainable normalcy would remain for the time being. The need for therapy grew. Everyone in the family started going to therapy, either alone or with a partner. Seek the assistance of a therapist who specializes in medical trauma as they navigate the aftermath of the violation they endured. With the help of a separate therapist, the kids were able to gain insight into their emotions and develop resilience in the face of criticism. Although these sessions were necessary, they were taxing. They started to piece together their family and their identities again, but it was a slow and terrible process. The growth was not in a straight line. After wonderful days, horrible ones would follow, but the terrible ones become less frequent and less devastating over time. After some time in family therapy, George finally spoke up about his worst dread. He was afraid that others would credit his achievements to his artificial advantages rather than his natural talent and hard work. In the end, how would he know if his efforts were for nothing more than programming? The therapist guided him to see that while changes could have an impact on potential, it still took effort, choice, and character to make that potential a reality. Even with all the odds in one's favor, failure is still possible if one does not work to develop their strengths. The opposite is also true. Changes did not ensure success. Who he became and his life's choices were still entirely his responsibility. A different path led to Charlotte's breakthrough. Her drawings were filled with anguish and bewilderment, and she had been drawing them incessantly. She gave her parents a fresh photo one day. It portrayed them as a superhero family, fighting nameless villains with the help of their special abilities. She declined to elaborate, saying only that maybe being unique was not always a bad thing. They may be able to help others and make a difference in ways that others are unable to do because of their unique abilities. She reminded everyone that perspective was a choice with her youthful brightness, which cut through everyone's darkness. They may see this as a blessing or a curse. There was merit to both readings, but one provided greater room for interpretation. discovering meaning amidst suffering. The family's situation changed months after the first statement. Recovering from such profound wounds takes time and effort. Instead, it's about enduring, adjusting, and embracing the unfixable. William dove headfirst into his advocacy efforts, teaming up with groups that were fighting for stronger oversight of genetic research and fertility clinics. Prioritizing the well-being of other impacted families, Princess Kate established an exclusive online community where they could exchange information and help without fear of reprisal from the media. She arranged get-togethers for kids from various backgrounds so they could meet one another, breaking down barriers and helping them feel less alone. Strict confidentiality agreements were in place to protect the privacy of all individuals involved in these gatherings. A community is born out of friends, a network of support, and a shared experience of trauma. Slowly but surely, the lawsuit against the facility and Dr. Holloway advanced. Fraud, violence, and performing unlicensed medical experiments were among the criminal allegations. Dozens more families demanded compensation and answers through civil lawsuits. In interviews, Holloway insisted his work was groundbreaking and that he would be vindicated by history, displaying no remorse. The family's determination to see him punished severely was only amplified by his haughtiness. No one was giving in, even though the trials would take years. Perseverance was necessary for justice. George decided to put his life experiences into academia, where he became deeply interested in bioethics, genetic engineering, designer babies, and the ethical and philosophical concerns raised by such practices were topics he studied at length. He had a remarkable level of maturity and concentration for his age, according to his instructors. In an effort to prevent anyone else from going through what he had, he informed his parents he wanted to have a say in shaping humanity's genetic destiny. He was turning his trauma into a mission, his suffering fueling his resolve to effect positive change. With a newfound fervor, Charlotte turned back to her artistic pursuits. However, the topics she covered changed. By questioning accepted standards of normalcy, she started making art that celebrated variety and individuality. The reception her artwork received during a school gallery presentation was phenomenal. Her message struck a chord with the audience. After Princess Kate and William saw the wisdom beyond her years in her youthful outlook, she started getting requests to show her work more widely. They were careful to only accept opportunities that acknowledged her independence and maturity while giving her a platform to speak. The family continued to find hope in Louis. Even though he was surrounded by danger, he managed to keep his innocence intact. He lived life to the fullest, finding delight in the simplest of things and serving as a reminder that there is light at the end of the tunnel. His hugs were restorative, and his laughter was a medication. Following his lead, the family learned to sometimes avoid processing or analyzing and simply exist together, rather than getting caught up in big questions. Those times of just being there were just as formative as therapy sessions. The union between William and Catherine became stronger and unique as a result. Through treachery, deceit, and trauma, they had overcome the greatest challenge to a partnership, which would have broken less resilient bonds. They stopped avoiding each other's anxieties and difficulties and started communicating with harsh honesty. After overcoming an obstacle that should have broken them, their bond grew stronger. They still had their share of bad days and moments when old hurts resurfaced, but they had shown they could weather storms as a team, and that knowledge helped them get through the bad times that followed. As the family showed strength and poise, the public's view began to change. Grudging admiration for how they dealt with a tough position supplanted the initial hype. As more and more people saw them as empathetic heroes who transformed violence into advocacy, their popularity skyrocketed in the polls. Though they never actively sought it out, the family also never turned down offers of comfort. Rather than letting their past experiences define them, they resolved to go forward and create lives that were shaped by their responses. Sitting down in their living room, the family waited a full year following the announcement. Something that, to an outsider, would have appeared mundane, but which, to them, held immense significance. It was a success. Regardless of the circumstances, their children were flourishing. There was no break in their household. There were many unanswered issues about the future, and its outcome was unclear. With each other's love and support as well as the wisdom gained from overcoming adversity, they confronted that uncertainty. Recalling the dreadful day she made her revelation, William gazed at Kate. He was incredibly thankful for her strength, bravery, and being by his side through hell as he reached out for her hand, and his tears seemed to never end. Her expression remained unchanged, one of profound appreciation, boundless affection, and an unwavering will to face whatever lay ahead as she retreated a bit. Their little ones couldn't stop laughing at something they saw on TV. The room was filled with the sound of the normalcy they had battled so hard to restore. Everything changed for them now. It wasn't ideal or even close to their expectations, but it belonged to them. Being genuine and gained with effort was sufficient. You have it. A public reckoning and a domestic torment for a family. Please subscribe to Inside Palace Walls and give this story a like if it touched you as much as it did us. We greatly appreciate your support.